actually have
I'm watching from the YouTube.
Facebook too. I've started streaming.
The Facebook, I don't think I didn't see that video.
And it should be there. It should be on the live card.
Okay, so I watch from the YouTube. You watch from the Facebook.
Okay.
Are you using Vodafone? Are you using Vodafone? Are you using Vodafone?
Yes, I have one.
So if I apply you one, you can connect it to your machine.
Yes.
It will strong.
Yeah.
Okay. Send. Okay, no worries. No worries.
Let's go on this one.
This might not be the kind of YouTube. It's not the kind of YouTube. Change the audio, this one source. And this one.
But then, does their sound come to YouTube?
No, it's your sound that comes to you.
It's not sound.
Just doing the camera, so I need to have
This is not for sound, right?
Yeah. It's supposed to show here as a sound.
It's setting you up right. So now we get to the crust of the issue here is north, south, east, and west. which methodology, which framework do we choose? Now, this is a tricky question, right? Because there are countless methodologies, frameworks, schools of thought about practicing and how it looks like to practice and work towards agility. But then our trip to business agility needs a firmer anchor than just which left or right to go. We need something that really holds us and will help us accelerate towards that direction. To start off with, is that starting off sequence or conundrum, the starting of conundrum. How do we start this off? I believe there are three things that we can do to help answer that question. Deliberate. Our decision to change and transform our organization is not like flipping a coin like my friend up there is doing, right? We need to make sure that we have that direction. We're deliberate in what we want to do. We have people who understand what that change is. We're not taking a chance on it. We need to baseline where we are currently. How do we know we've changed? How do we know we've improved our way of working? We baseline. We know where we are currently. And did I say baseline already? Because it's really important. Baseline. What's your starting point? What do you currently do? What are your current practices like? How long does it take you to move from concept to development and then to a product that's actually in service? How many bugs do you see in production? What's your current employee satisfaction scorecard saying? What percentage of your product is actually used in the market? Change is never easy, but baselining allows us to be able to see how that needle moves over time as we begin to embed some of these back to basic core principles in practice. The last one, personal favorite of mine, is you've got to be predetermined. You know, one of the worst things in life is to be deliberate and confident about something, but then really end up in the wrong place. It's like you're going on a trip with your parents or with your friends in the car, and all of you are so determined that you know where you're going to, and you ask directions. We know where we're going to, and then you end up miles off course, right? You were all confident, you were all deliberate in what you wanted to do, but you weren't predetermined. You didn't open up your Google Maps and check what routes to check, or check with the traffic to see whether there's a blockage on the M4 on the motorway or something. You need to change your route. You need to be predetermined of what you want to. Make sure you engage with specialists, experts, subject matter people who've been there before, who understand the act of transformation, who understand what's needed to get business moving. And it's important to measure all these three things against that why statement that I said initially. Does it reflect back to that why statement? But now, that anchor. For me, this is the best anchor you can actually have. Right? There's an old church hymn, which I'm sure a couple of you know. It talks about, will your anchor hold the storms of life? Right? Will your anchor hold? What anchor do you set yourself as a business? Right? I've mentioned anchor quite a few times, and I'm probably going to mention it a few more times when I get to the crust of Shuhari and understanding some of those core principles and ways to set up our teams. I have one unflappable principle when it comes to business agility. Whatever you're doing needs to align to these 12 principles and 4 guiding values. No matter whether it's Scrum, whether it's Kanban, LESS, XP, SAFE, you need to make sure you're aligning to these principles and to these guidelines, because it will make sure you set up in the right place. In sport, Formula One is one of my favorite, my loves, and I like relating things to real life. In Formula One, it's one of the best examples of this in practice. In business, countless organizations have excelled and developed way ahead of competition. Formula One, they really look at ensuring that they're satisfying, they're delivering value frequently with the upgrades they make in the cars, from race 1 to race 2, race 3, all the way to race 21 we have coming up in Saudi Arabia. Right? They break all the silos in their organization. You can't have a successful Formula One team if you've got silos. HR sits here, supply chain sits here, and finance sits here. You've got to break those silos and be able to have a clear view, a slice through the organization that helps deliver this value earlier. Build projects around motivated individuals. Everybody, I don't think there's one person who works in Formula One doesn't love the sport. They love it, they enjoy it. We need to love and enjoy what we're doing in terms of our ways of working. You can continue and go through all these 12 principles, but effectively, you need to make sure whatever you're doing in terms of your agile transformation, build projects focuses on these anchors, right? And then you make sure that whatever practices you put in place, puts individuals over individuals and interactions at the core of what you're doing. You're looking at satisfying the customer and collaborating with the customer as quickly and as often as possible. And that will set you in the right path to achieving that business agility. Quickly on to my two friends, which I'll spend quite a significant amount of time on. Shuhari. It comes from the Japanese martial arts concept, and I'm sure a lot of you have watched one kung fu film or one form of kung fu, any film from Asia, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee kind of movie. So you've seen these things. But there's that principle that applies that describe the stages of moving from learning to mastery. Friends, which I'll spend quite when you're setting up your team, because initially your team joins and they need to learn the fundamentals and then move to a point where they've mastered it and effectively they become a high-performing team, self-sustaining. You can step back and begin to focus on other areas of the business. If you don't have that plan to move your teams from learning teams to teams that master their skill, master their art, you've not set yourself in the right path, in the right way to achieve business agility. So let's start looking at some of the concepts of SHU. It's the absolute beginning stage of everything. You follow the teachings of one master precisely. You concentrate on how to do the tasks as instructed by that master. So that master could be, you want to go Scrum. What are the principles and practices that you need to do in Scrum? Obviously, you do your daily stand-ups, you do your refinements, your reviews, your retrospectives, but how do you do it? There's a way you need to do it. Go by the book. In some instances, we've gone by going with the 3 questions you ask in the stand-up, and then with time, evolving that practice to have it more conversational, because the teams evolve. The point of SHU is about sound technical foundations. And this can be built most efficiently by following only a single route to the goal. So I've seen many organizations trying to dabble in multiple options of path to agility. I'll do a little bit of Scrum, do a little bit of Kanban, pick a little bit of XP, let's see, okay, why don't we add a little bit of waterfall here and do a little bit of this here, and then they end up with what I like to call the Frankenstein of agility. It doesn't really, at the end of the day, what happened to Frankenstein? Frankenstein's monster? Kill Frankenstein. We don't want our journey to agility to kill our business. So we need to make sure we're building it the right way, the fundamentals. There's no beating that fundamental stage, making sure you're getting grounded properly in one framework, one methodology, and then adding to that from other frameworks. So I encourage, if you don't remember anything I've said, please remember you need to have the SHU, right? The next one is developing on the how, which is branching out. You've got the foundation, you've got the skills. Now we can begin to learn from other best practices, right? Because you see the team are doing the right thing. You see the team begin to understand the principles and the theory behind the technique. So that takes us back to our Agile manifesto and our values. The team understand the principles, they demonstrate the principles, they understand the core value. So everything they do begins to reflect that core value, and they begin to branch out a little bit further. Learning from one master and integrating that into their practice. They've done that. So you can begin to move to that stage of how where they branch out, the stage of spirituality or mentally, when it is necessary to have the high mind of inquiry and self-reflection. So you look back and you say, okay, we're doing this really well. We've got this Scrum thing down. So I think we can begin to branch out and look at other things we can pull in and get better at the way we're working. Oh, now we've got Scrum, we've nailed it. Let's begin to scale out to the rest of the business. Let's scale it up, and maybe we go scale Agile and scale it up into the entire organization. And then my personal favorite is the re-stage, break away. Right? And this is where you begin to learn from your own experience. How did it work, particularly in your environment? How did you apply it in your business to make it work? And you can begin to teach other people, other parts of your organization, internally and externally. And this is the stage where the student is no longer the student, but now becomes a pioneering practitioner. So your teams begin to influence other people. So start small, go big. Start small. That one team becomes such a master at their art, they begin to infect, like a virus. This will be a good virus. They begin to infect other parts of the business by teaching them these principles and practices. Now, you've caught on to the gist by now. I like using pictures and analogies and stuff like that. We're going to meet our proof and that framework. The coach, we're going to look at Shuhari from these three perspectives, or these three lenses: coach, leadership, and the team. From the coach, at the shoe stage, you need to make sure that your organization has a coach that enforces the basics of the framework. If you're at that shoe stage, you can't have a coach in your organization who's just going to let everything fly in the oh, you don't have to go stand up, you can cancel it today if you're busy with too much work. Oh, you don't need to be doing refinement, we can just meet probably in one iteration, spend 2 days refining the entire backlog. You don't have to do it each and every. You need to make sure your organization at the beginning stage has that coach that enforces the fundamentals of whatever framework you chose. And I've been fortunate working in a couple of organizations that we've had such coaching at the beginning stage where they enforce the fundamentals. It's painful, it's not nice, but ultimately it helps us in the long run because then we can progress to the next stage. Also, the coach needs to be the teacher, and there's a mentality a teacher has. The teacher has patience. The teacher will repeat over and over and over till a student gets it. So probably you might be a coach and you might not like it. Probably you might not be suited for an enterprise or a business that's at the infancy stage because you need to be repeating that. So you might need to focus your coaching ability or your outlook to a different setup. In the hard stage, begin to impact the ideals of the manifesto. Encourage pause moments. I like this phrase of pause moments, where the team break position. So the teams have been practicing, but encourage them to pause. Let's take a step back. We've done this for a little bit. What do you guys think? How can we improve it? We take a pause, they recap, they adjust, and we run again. At that stage, effectively, it's the coach. Standing on the touchline, he's done the training period a week with the team. They're on the field of play. He stands back and watches them, allows them to play, passes a few advice in here and there, makes a few tactical changes, substitutions, etc. But then the team is moving along on its own. And at the re-stage, the coach needs to step aside and let the teams evolve, which is the hardest when you've been with them throughout the journey as a coach. But you need to step aside and you become the advisor. You come in occasionally to speak. From a leadership perspective, I'll go through this quite quickly. Leadership needs to be the promoter at the shoe stage and just trust the fundamentals of the framework. You've gone down that line, trust it. At the hard stage, leadership needs to be the visionary. They need to start looking at taking that step back and also themselves living the Agile manifesto. And at the re-stage, they need to be the catalyst, creating the right environment, the right setup to allow the teams to evolve. This is where the teams begin to say, why are we doing, we've been doing this for so long, we want to change it. And management, being the capitalist, will allow them to change it. Leadership, being the capitalist, will say, you know what, I'm going to give you this budget to try that out and see if it works to accelerate your journey towards high performance. And the last, which is the where I like to focus a lot of my time, like Uzo said, in the trenches with the teams. The team needs to be a sponge at the shoe stage and just take everything in. The sponge, when you dump a sponge up, you can get a big enough sponge, and you dump it into a bowl of water, it sucks up everything. It doesn't suck some of the water, it doesn't suck the water and maybe the coloring, it sucks everything. It takes all the knowledge in, it takes all the understanding, it takes all the practices, it takes everything. And there's no skipping this stage. At the hard stage, the team needs to become a thinker. They need to begin to say, we've done this, we understand the principles. Wow. Those pause moments that I mentioned, the coach encouraging them to have, the team themselves need to start having those pause moments and thinking about what they can do. And at the re-stage, the team becomes a protein. They are now actively pursuing pursuance of self-discovery. A quick recap, these are committees. We're probably 3 minutes over. A quick recap to set everything right. Whether we need to go on this journey, I think we've all been sold we need to go on the journey. We need to be able to adjust, adapt, align, and conform, depending on where we sit in our business journey. And agility allows us to do that. There's that important thing of that concept of why we're talk about. And it came more to life for me this week, over the weekend, when I was reading an article on the different generations that we have. My generation, don't forget my age recognition, Generation X, we're resourceful, logical, good thinkers and problem solvers. That's the characteristic of who we are. And this was an article I read from Dr. Alex Abrams, who's an expert in generational cohorts. And she said, that's Generation X, resourceful, logical, good problem solver. Generation Y and Generation Z, where most of the people that make up our teams come from. Generation Y are confident and they're curious and they question authority. They need to understand why you want me to do this. And I'm sure you can relate when you're on a journey with one of these, when they ask why. They always need to understand the why. So it's important, if you want to go on that journey of towards agility, you have to have a why statement that can resonate with your generation. Why for you? Why versus why? Nice coincidence there, right? The Generation Z guys, they're also confident, and these are guys depending 1997 or some stats say 1993, some stats say from 2000 onward, but these are the guys who are digital natives, as they call them, and they're ambitious. So your why statement would lock horns with their ambition and then have that buy-in. So it correlates with having the teams buy into the idea of transforming, buy into the idea of changing, and by so doing, they begin to immerse themselves. And I mentioned that in the beginning, we need to immerse them. They will begin to immerse themselves properly if you can have them relate to that wisely. And the last one there goes back to my wonderful friend Zuka, volatile, uncertain, complex, biggest. We need to mind the gap that exists between our ability to act, respond, and change to our life. We want to try and get that gap as small as possible. When that gap is wide, then we know our transformation is not working properly. We need to start trying to get that gap smaller and smaller. That if something happens in the market, we can quickly react and release a product or a service by closing that gap. So in terms of forming the team, there are a couple of things I want to call out. Make sure your teams have an identity. It's not just the name and a backlog or the purpose and responsibilities, but they need to have an identity beyond that. And what that team needs to have, and one of the things that I really love that came up, and I used it a couple of times, and it came up from the Scaled Agile framework again, is the team formation toolkit. Taking the team through that team formation toolkit where they identify themselves. It starts with, why do we exist as a team? How do we succeed as a team? It was really fantastic and exciting. So get your team to have an identity. If your team doesn't have an identity currently, you probably need to do that completely because it helps. And you always do a time check adjust process. You look back after a couple of iterations or increments or sprints, whichever language you use. You look back and see, do we still relate to that? Listening. The team needs listening. It's an odyssey. Journeying to agility is long. And you need to make sure they have autonomy. They're able to win the race. And they push the boundaries. Winning the race means you're not looking to go 50 meters if it's a 100-meter race. So your team should be set up such that they can go all the way and deliver everything, not half the way. The last few points I have listed there. There's no donuts in your journey to agility. I mentioned shoe. As a coach, you should be able to operate with shoe. As a leadership, shoe is important. But as a team, those principles that I outlined at the shoe stage are really key to be able to create your complete circle. It may not be linear, your journey. It's not a line, right? As you can see over there, my geometry is a bit off, I can't mention the trick, but it's not linear. And then it's progressive. You start small and you go big. My last slide really is a question I leave with everybody. Is once we get to where we intended to get to our mission, is it a destination or is it stopover for us? And I'll leave that question and answer a little bit later. I've got my opinion on that, and I'd love to share that with everybody. I'm sure Dan will also have an opinion on whether it's a destination or a stopover. But just chew over that question. When it comes back, we'll have a discussion on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joshua. That was amazing. So is it a destination or stopover? Hold your questions down or hold your response, and once we start the plenary session, then or afterwards, we can discuss on whether it's a destination or stopover. So next will be Williams. You go to the presentation. Okay, he's back. You, William. Okay, sure.
But if we were agile and decided that William needed to go next, we just roll with that. But, sure. No, I'm ready to pick up the ball. Joshua, you did a great job. I have so much that I'm wanting to talk about in the panel discussion later. So thank you for taking the lead here on getting us going. My name is Dan Newman. I am a consultant with a technical background that eventually went up through project management paths, a lot of traditional software development, and then finally got introduced to Agile in about 2009. And for me, it's been a journey of never going back. I had some opportunities, as they say, 3 years after I got introduced to Agile. I'm like, I'm not going back. I like the Agile thing. It's really exciting for me. And another question is, what do we do with it? What are the right choices to make as we go along our journey? And so I want to share some of my thoughts with you. I think to the point Joshua was making, there are many paths, and I hope that comes through as I share some thoughts with you folks today. So thank you for taking the time to join, and I'm looking forward to spending the rest of the conference with you folks here. I'll take us through a little bit of a roadmap here on Agile methodologies or Agile frameworks that might fit well in your organization. And I thought I'd start with single team activities, Eventually then we'll talk about multiple teams and scaling at the enterprise. It's really important to start, like we were talking about Joshua with the shoe, you start with the small things and then you build on and you build on. I've seen a scaled Agile implementation that started with no Agile to scale, and that didn't go very well. And so I want to talk to you about some of the choices I see at the team level and then building up. And then William, I think we'll talk about the journeys in his part of his talk, and I'll be looking forward to his thoughts on this as well. I would be surprised if there are too many people on the conference who haven't heard of the Scrum framework. It's certainly the elephant in the room as far as Agile frameworks go. There's a very clear playbook, and from a shoe standpoint, to do Scrum, you put in the roles, you put in the events, you put in the artifacts. There are training organizations that would love to help you get started. They'll sell you training. They'll give you a certification you can renew every year. It's easy to hire for these roles. You can put out a job description that says, we want a product owner. You can put out a job description that says, we're looking for a Scrum Master. And so it's just really nice and installable. Josh, I think you were talking about the phrase of immersing. I love the immersive Agile. And one of my concerns when people look at the Scrum framework is sometimes it's more of a submarine in the ocean. They're not really immersed. It's this weird little thing that floats along in the organization that isn't really Agile. They grab Scrum, they stuck it in, but it's not because it's an organization. It's because somebody saw an article on one of the business magazines about being Agile, and they said, well, if we get ourselves a Scrum team, we're Agile, so they put it in. Scrum can work really well. I'll show you later, 66% of organizations are doing Scrum. It's often not a wrong choice. It works really well when there's a complex domain with a lot of uncertainty. If you know exactly what you're doing and you do it the same every time, you aren't going to get the benefits from the Scrum framework that come from building an increment, inspecting and adapting, building another increment, inspecting and adapting, and repeating through. The other popular framework I see at the team level is the Kanban method. Sometimes it's called the methodology. I think that's overstepping. Kanban is 6 practices that you can use. Visualize the work. You limit your work in process. You make your policies explicit so everybody knows how to operate in it. And then you kind of watch the system through feedback loops. How are things working? Do we have flow happening? And then you improve that system collaboratively, and you come up with experiments for how to make that system better. And so Kanban and Scrum, for me, are the two that I see most often on the team level. I like Kanban because it says start where you are and then improve over time. Scrum framework, we talked, there's roles, there's events, there's artifacts. You have to do Scrum stuff in order to call it Scrum. Kanban's different. It says start where you are, visualize, then work in process, make your policies explicit. At the team level, though, Scrum has the majority of the market share at this point. Then you see a little bit of Scrumban, the Scrum with Kanban. You see Scrum and XP. For me, I get a little concerned when I see 2/3 of the companies are just doing Scrum, because it's really hard to deliver an increment every 2 weeks if you're not bringing in extreme programming practices, if you're not looking at DevOps practices, if you don't have the leadership thinking differently about how to do agility. I get awfully concerned when I see Scrum-only implementations. But super popular at the team level. What do you do if you have multiple teams? So these two get a little blurry, whether we're just coordinating multiple teams or whether we're doing much scaling. We'll stick our toes in that water. So, If you're doing Scrum, there are 3 different ways to scale Scrum, and this session isn't about picking apart Less versus Nexus versus Scrum at scale. It's just to say, if you're doing Scrum, there are 3 different approaches you can do. Pick one. I don't necessarily think that one is superior over the other one. Maybe you've got somebody in your organization who is experienced with one of these. Maybe you're aligned with Scrum Alliance from a training standpoint, or Scrum.org from a certification standpoint. Certainly it makes sense then to look at the scaling framework that's going to fit with your organizing body. Where things get really interesting is methods and approaches when we're talking about the enterprise. It's fairly simple to have Scrum teams, Kanban teams. Maybe your Scrum teams are delivering in increments, your Kanban teams are doing flow. Ultimately, those teams are going to run into impediments within the organization if the organization is really trying to be agile. So what are the options there? Gartner did some research looking at which enterprise frameworks people are using. 2/3 of the organizations are doing at least one agile framework at a scaling entity. And SAFe is certainly in the lead from organizations that have already implemented it. They've implemented and abandoned it. Not a very large percent have abandoned SAFe. Or they're considering it. 36% are on the roadmap to go to Scaled Agile. Right behind that, we've got Scrum of Scrums. Makes sense. Scrum has well over 2/3 of the market from a team standpoint. It makes sense then to look at scaling using Scrum of Scrums. Then Spotify did some interesting stuff a while ago. Spotify was along their Agile journey using Agile principles, Agile values, and they came up with their own approach. They don't just take the Scrum stuff and roll that out. And then they wrote a blog post about it, and other people started saying, hey, wait a minute, how to fight it was interesting, we should do that too. And it's just been really interesting to see how much traction Spotify model, I'll use quotes, the Spotify model has gotten. Even if you ask Spotify and they go, A, that's not a model, and B, that's not even what we do anymore. Because they've moved on, they've taken the Agile principles, they've taken the values, and they've moved beyond what is often referred to as the Spotify model. You've got disciplined Agile delivery, coming up behind all those, and large-scale Scrum, and then we've got Nexus, which are different flavors of Scrum scale and discipline. Some of these popular frameworks, obviously SAFe has a profound amount of material for it. When we talk, like Joshua was doing, about roadmaps and journeys and shoe things where you can pick up and you can do the practice, SAFe has done a phenomenal job of making materials available. Oftentimes when organizations say, well, how can I coordinate multiple teams? How can I look at my portfolio? It's so easy to grab SAFe materials and start introducing people to that. One of the challenges I think SAFe has around SAFe can be very challenging, and I wouldn't be the guy to get the test right on what all those certifications are. But I want to give you a little bit of a decision tree, if we want to take it back to, again, Joshua's given a roadmap, so a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but bear with me on the decision tree. First of all, do we actually need to coordinate multiple teams? Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. If you don't need to coordinate multiple teams, just use one of the team-level frameworks. Use Scrum, use Kanban. It might be sufficient for what you need to do. If you do need coordination of multiple teams, then you need to look at a scaling framework. And I want to be clear, when you might have a lot of teams that can all deliver independently. That's not scaling, at least the way I tend to think about it. It's just having a lot of Scrum teams or a lot of Kanban teams. But when you need those teams to coordinate, I was working with a client who was doing the next generation map of the world. Right? That takes a lot of teams to coordinate satellite data, data from cars, data from terrestrial maps, all kinds of different things. It's a scaling problem. If you're scaling just a product, you can look to scale Scrum, Less, Nexus, those types of things. Which one do you do? Do you have somebody with experience from a scaling company? Great, use their scaling framework. If not, I don't know, pick a random number, 1 to 3, and pick one of the frameworks. I don't necessarily think that there's the best Scrum scaling framework. Now, if you really want to transform your organization then to be more agile, small, medium, large enterprises, that gets to be a whole different challenge beyond the Scrum framework. If you're small, maybe Scrum scaling still works for you. You want to do the cool thing? Do the Spotify thing. That's what the cool kids are doing these days. I don't know, the digital natives, as they say, or the Gen Y and Z, that's where they're at. If you're a large enterprise, you want a lot of guidance. You need an industry leader, and do you really like paying for certain
So let's take a look at the journey. What would you do if you're on such a journey to enterprise agility? These are 5 steps that I would encourage, and I speak about it, I share about it. I love it because the 5 steps are a good way to go about with enterprise agility. First, let's talk about our journey. Develop a strategic roadmap for executing agile strategy in the organization. And that is why I am a big fan of the skilled agile framework. It does not start with leaders on the fence, it brings leaders in. So, in our strategy, let's talk about enterprise agility. So, leaders do not become bystanders, they become big players in the whole process. So we developed that strategic roadmap to embedding agility across the entire organization. And it's just not the Scrum team, it's just not the software team, it's the entire organization. Yet, but we'll start with a pilot and scale it up once we've all built that knowledge, understanding of agile ways of working. Then next, what could we do? Let's take a look at the entire organization. Let's apply systems thinking. Think about the value stream. I'll talk more on this too. Yep. Leadership have kicked it off. They've talked about enterprise agility across the organization. Now, let's bring every unit of the organization into the game. It just can't be the development team, it can't be the IT team. It's holistic thinking. If we have teams on the ground, teams selling, teams engaging directly with the customer, we need to give them that agile mindset. The agile mindset is a way of life. It helps drive value across the entire organization. And we could be asking ourselves, what's value? Let's take that holistic approach and make sure that we make everyone know what is value. Thirdly, what do we do? Select a framework, and I say safe. Yeah, I'm quite strong about it because I'll tell you why later on again. Why safe? So select a framework. Safe embeds Scrum, safe embeds Kanban, safe embeds DevOps, safe embeds all the good practices. And I'll highly recommend that to anyone. And it brings leaders to the discussion very early. And it's quite interesting. On Dan's slide, he says, a lot of companies go on the journey of adopting framework. And so far, those that stop using SAFe are quite less than all the others. So select a framework that will enable your transformation. And I'll go back to what Joshua said. Listen to the coaches, get people trained, and get people transformed on the journey. Then what do? Build capabilities across the entire organization. And finally, let's communicate the change across the organization. Change is a journey. It's a very powerful journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a day. Everyone within the organization should join the race. There'll be laggards, there'll be resistance, there'll be folks that will push back. And on that journey, you can only bring a few people. Did I say a few people? You want to bring everyone when you're going on an enterprise agile journey. So these are the 5 steps. Ahmad, please do put your question in the chat box. When I'm done, I'll definitely pick it up. Okay. Thank you so much, Ahmad. Yeah. So let's take a look at it. We're looking at a strategic roadmap as our number one thing. First, let's have a strategy and let's develop 2 roadmaps. I always say, let's develop a 3 months to 1 year roadmap and let's look at a yearly delivery roadmap. Those are key. You need to understand the short term, the medium term, and then the long term. We don't want to focus on just now and forget about tomorrow. Tomorrow will come whether we wake up or not. It's just that we have to wake up to meet tomorrow. We have to look at the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So when you're developing your teams from the onset, you develop them looking into the future before you scale the team. So you always need a blueprint, and a blueprint will enable the team on that particular journey. When I picked this and I shared it to the team, they came back, William, it's very fuzzy. We just can't see our strategy. We can't see vision. We can't see all the things you are talking about. And I say, yes. Most people say strategy is fuzzy. It's something discussed at leadership level. If not communicated properly, um, we just don't know about what's happening. And you could go around many teams and say, can you please tell me the vision of your company or the vision of the company you are currently working in? Okay, I need to go and look at my work card, or let me look on my screen. It will tell me the vision. The other one I get, let me say, pretty annoyed with is when I speak to Agilists and they say, oh, the values, the 4 values, individual interactions over principles and tools, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and then working software. William, we need working software over documentation. And I said, okay, but what's the values of the company you work for? Oof, it's not agile. It does not align to agility. Really? It's not agile. No, William, it's just not agile. I'm like, have you ever taken a step back to remember them? Have you done the alignment? And I'll be really worried if you are in our organization and you've not considered looking at our values and mapping it to agile values, looking at our values and mapping it to agile principles, which should come first. The organization has been in existence, it pays our bills. Let's look at the organization strategy. Let's look at its values. Let's look at its objectives. And when we match agility's values, principles to it, that is where we see value. That is where we see the clarity in strategy. When we only focus on agile values and miss the organization's values, we are on a journey that at the end of the day, we said we were agile, but we didn't see our leaders being agile because you also didn't join the journey to being agile. So when we ask the big question, agile values, agile principles, ask yourself, what's my company's values? What are our objectives? Where are we going to? And where is that fuzzy strategy? I think strategy is not fuzzy. We've not been taking a good look at it. And if we take that bold step to initially start with a strategy, where the strategy states clearly, we are going to be agile in our ways of working. We are driving new ways of doing things. But let's look at some definitions of what strategy is. Strategy is choosing what not to do. Okay, Michael Porter. Great. You cannot be everything to everyone. If you decide to go north, you cannot go south at the same time. So I choose safe, and I'm quite clear, straightforward with it. I know why the safe framework supports organizations. Thirdly, strategy without process is a little more than a wish list. Straightforward. Yep. So we need to make sure that we are clear about our strategies. Yeah. So, lastly, strategy is about making choices, trade-offs, and being deliberate. Yep. If we have to go on the journey, I think Joshua said it, we can't be using Scrum, or we can't just be using Save, Spotify. No, I think it's Joshua and Dan, they said both. Save, Spotify, Scrum at Scale, discipline agile delivery. We need to be specific on where we want to be as an organization. So even in the enterprise agility, we want to stay focused on that particular journey. So we will need to take a look at our roadmap. So we will have a 3 months to 1 year roadmap, and it should state clearly what we intend to do. We want to communicate agile. We want to train our leaders. Once the strategy is set up, create a pilot team, carry out a team assessment, select a scaling agile, train teams, and this could be our short-term to 1 year roadmap. And then we need a long-term roadmap, one that tells us what we're doing now and what we intend to do in the long term. We need that clear yearly delivery plan. Yeah. Let's apply systems thinking. Holistically, let's look at all the parts of the organization. It's just not about the development value stream where everything is done. Let's think about the operational value stream. And when we start thinking about the operational value stream, we bring all these teams as part of what we do. And agility does not only become one part of the organization, just software. We bring all the teams together, taking that holistic mindset. Here are some examples of various value stream thinking approaches that enables us to take that holistic thinking. If a loan is needed, who is involved? What are the steps involved? What are the systems involved? What are the various teams involved? Let's understand the value that comes out of a particular set of activities. And when we can bring all those teams together, they enable us deliver that value we want to our customers, to the business. And there's that interesting code, the customer is number one. Of course, we can deliver all the value to the customer. The business needs to be sustainable. If the business is not sustainable, we won't get paid and we won't be where we want to be. So we need to bring those two together, customer value, business value. And when you map out the value stream, it enables you to see those two, focusing on the customer value, business value, and merging those two. And that's the way enterprise agility works. My colleagues have talked about various frameworks, and they've talked about team frameworks, Scrum, XP, Scrum Ban, DevOps, and there's been a focus on the various scaling frameworks. What framework would I recommend? Personally, again, is the SAFe framework. Let me take just a quick walkthrough on the SAFe framework. On the SAFe framework, we have business agility, taking operational value streams, and then it's also talking about the development value streams. So it's not that silo thinking. We bring both value streams to work together. It's got 7 competencies and that drive business agility, and the competency that serves as a foundation to driving it and gets the strategy created is our leadership, the lean agile leadership. Without the support of the lean agile leadership, we won't be delivering what's expected. So our leaders need to lead the way. Our leaders need to have that growth mindset. Our leaders need to support and drive the new ways of working. I remember talking to a team and they said, William, we've been on an agile journey and we don't think our leaders know what it takes to be agile. And I'm like, okay, so you've all been trained. Oh yes, we went for a Scrum Master course. We went for a Product Owner course. What other courses have you been to? What about the developers? Did you send them on a course? Oh, they went for an Agile 101. We created one in the organization and we taught everyone. So for the teams, they had Agile 101. Oh, beautiful. What about the leaders? William, do we have to talk about them? I'm like, so how do you expect them to think agile and work with you on that journey? Oh, they are leaders. They should be visionaries. They should know what to do. Okay. It's been happening over the years, and most leaders really do not follow suit because they've not been trained. They'll watch a few videos. Some leaders want to be in the trenches to understand what a daily stand-up is, a review, a retrospective is. But giving them that knowledge, training, education would help the entire team in the long run. But if it's only with the teams, then we are going to lose. These stories are many. I've seen so many teams practicing agile, and it's always been siloed, just the team focus. SAFe takes that holistic approach and uses all the supporting frameworks. So teams can use Kanban, teams can use Scrum and XP. XP is about building quality practices from a software perspective. Having trained a team in research has best practices to ensure that we build quality in the outcome, in the delivery. So XP practices from a software perspective are great. In a non-software environment, we still need to what? Think about how to build those quality practices. There's design thinking. Awesome. I'm a big fan of design thinking because it puts the customer in the middle of everything. So we have empathy, we have for the customer we'll use personas, empathy maps, um, various tools to just understand our customer. Then we go into the define stage. When we've gone through that empathy phase of knowing what the real problem is, we could then go to the next stage and say, okay, what actually is the problem? The customer says, my glasses are not working. Okay, why are your glasses not working? Oh, when I'm walking in the rain, I can't see. Of course, you won't be able to see when there's water on your glasses. Or is there anything else? We can dig into those to find the root cause. Probably when the customer is walking in the rain, there's fog and it does not allow them to see. So we can now dig into the problem, understand the problem, and then in the empathy, define, ideate stage, we start looking at really what are the options for the problem. We prototype, we test, and we add it to the backlog. So I'm a big fan of encouraging teams to look at design thinking practices. These are some of the frameworks and the best practices, but SAFe takes a look at the entire agile environment. And some people will say, William, this is a big framework. I understand. Yes, it takes time to learn, adapt, and then to be able to help yourself on the journey. Hence, Joshua said, get a coach, get an XPC who would help your organization on the journey. So when we go on the journey with leadership support, understanding of our company's values, objectives, our strategy, and our practices, and we have that synergy with the SAFe framework, it helps us as an organization or as a team get some of the benefits talked about by SAFe's customers. 20 to 50% increase in productivity, 25 to 75% improvement in quality, 30 to 75% faster time to market, and 10 to 50% increase in employee engagement and satisfaction. All this will come about if we embed the SAFe practices, the competencies, the principles, which include Scrum, Kanban, Agile thinking. If we embed them well, go through a systematic process, then we can get the outcome and value we need from the SAFe framework. If we are going to be less disciplined about it and not focused on how we embed the SAFe approach, we are not going to get the benefits we see. What are some of the companies that are applying SAFe? Currently, we're doing some work with Leshego. Yep, they've been on the journey. They've started looking at scaling, and they are using the SAFe frameworks. I've been doing some work with Philips for the last 3 to 4 years, and it's amazing how they are on the journey. And here are some other companies I've done some work with: EY, Deloitte, and a few other consultancies. It's never too late for your company to start. It's never too late for you to start the journey of looking at enterprise agility. It enables you to have that holistic mindset of bringing everyone to the discussion. So what do we do when we are on the journey? First, we want to build capabilities to solve the business problem of delivering value. And where do we start? Yay! This time we're going to start differently. We're going to bring leadership. This time we want to train our leaders. We want to make sure that our leaders know what to do. Next, individuals. Oh, that's going to take a long time. At Philips, there are over 100,000 people. And if we were training individuals, that would take us a long, long time. So let's take a shift. Let's train teams. Let's bring teams to the table. We love teams. I love being in a team because the team spirit it's infectious. When I'm down, my team members will lift me up and we can go together. So I love teams. We've got champions. Great stuff. We always need champions. We need coaches. We need um, people who love the journey. But let me ask, let's type in the chat, okay? I hope we can all type in the chat. Um, let's say hello. Oh, the chat is disabled. Sorry.
Yes, I think
When
we
we,
need the chat
okay,
enabled.
all right. So when you ask the big question, who gets left behind on this journey when building capabilities and problem solving? Yeah, it's a big one. Management. Yep. Management gets left behind. Why? I can't believe this. How many people are in leadership? Let's say if we look in this area, we'll get, let's say, 50 people, teams, another big one in an organization of let's say 3,000. Management will be about 60 to 70. Teams will be about, let's say, 1,005 to 2,000. And then we have this big group of people. They are the main drivers. They they build the bridge between leadership and teams. They communicate and share the strategy. But then often we don't bring them to the conversation early. And from a research, it says more than often, if a transformation is to fail, is because the management team have not been brought to the discussion early. It's because the management team have been left out of the entire process. Um, my, my manager is not agile. Why? Because you never got them on the journey. You didn't train them. We left them out. We talked about leadership. We've talked about teams. It's all about team. It's a scrum master and manager. He's part of the team. It's a product owner. But management is always being left out. So this time we will have a change of plans. We'll bring management in as well, and then we'll get our champions to enable us. SAFE recommends an implementation roadmap when we want to go agile. If we start with a tipping point, we'll train our leaders, train management, train teams. We'll set up a lean agile center of excellence to support us. And then we do our training. But before we get here, I think I like a lot of what Joshua said. Let's start with the team, embed Scrum, embed Kanban practices. So when it comes to scaling, they can serve as the champions to help us drive that new ways of working. And once we've got most people trained, we've been on the road of making sure that everyone understands the new ways of working and is championing the new ways of working. We have our big room planning event known as the PI planning to create alignment across teams. Quite recently, I'll say last week, I was in a PI planning event, and I was amazed at how over 2 days, over 130 people just could embed and think agile. But previously, it was, I'll say, we'll say a team of about 50 to 60 to 70 were talking, eating, drinking, loving agile. But over 2 days, we had 130. I'm sure the 130 will speak to another 130 and to another 130. And that is the multiplication effect. That 2-day PI planning event was an eye-opener for many. They learned from their colleagues who were so good at it, but now everyone just could give feedback, could learn from their colleagues, could also create Kanban boards, could break features into stories. And I think that is the power of the 2-day planning event. It's expensive, but it drives value quickly across the organization. Finally, let's communicate the change. Yay! There's no change without communication. And if you really, really want to see a big change, we need to communicate the change. We need everyone rooting for the new ways of working. It's just not, It's great when we have one person or a team of 70 people talking about it. We want to create that environment where, yes, everyone believes in the new ways of working and it's across the entire organization. I've been saying agile, I've been talking about enterprise agility, but my good friends, it comes with these challenges when scaling. I'm not just going to say scaling is easy. The journey to scaling has its challenges. And when there's not enough leadership participation, when the entire organization is resistant, when there's less collaboration, when there's fragmented tooling and insufficient training and education, and the organizational culture that's not supported, we will get impacted. And the lack of skills and experience with agile methods can derail what the best laid plans to transformation. I'm not saying all is doom. There are benefits, of course. There are benefits to adopting agile. I've been a big waterfall fan. I've done Prince 2 PMP, love PMP, Ed drank PMP, and even the PMI has moved into disciplined agile. So agile ways of working are really great. And these are the first five: ability to manage priorities, business alignment, delivery of speed to market, and then predictability, engineering discipline, uh, team morale. I would say organizational morale increases. And these are some of the benefits that organizations are tracking going on this skilled agile or agile journey. So to wrap up, what are my key takeaways for us on this particular discussion? It's a blank canvas. We need to start from somewhere. We need to start thinking about how can we be agile? How can we adopt the mindset? How can we bring leadership along? How can we engage our stakeholders? How can we choose the right approach? My recommendation would be think about the 5 steps to enterprise agility. Yep, strategy first. Bring our leadership to the table. If they are not there, we are going to have a hard time. Secondly, let's apply a holistic approach. We've had enough of just saying agile teams. We want to look at enterprise agility. We want to bring all the teams to the journey. Next, select a framework. I'm rooting for SAFe. Take a look at it. There's so many frameworks out there, but I would recommend taking a look at the SAFe framework. Yeah. Next, why not build capabilities and build them across the entire organization, just not one place. And if you fail to build capabilities, at least if you're on the journey, communicate the change across the entire organization. If you bring one person who talks to one, who talks to another, and we see that multiplying effect, we are on the journey to bringing change. It's all about change, and delivering change is not the easiest. It takes a time, and we are in for the long haul. I'm sure Uzo is going to give us some times to look at a lot of questions. But I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined us on this journey. And I'm more than, uh, let's say, I've enjoyed the last two speakers. I've made a lot of notes. Shu Hari, I've looked at what Dan has shared, and I'm sure we've all benefited from this particular 2 hour. And we'll spend some time on questions. Over to you, Uzo, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, William. Oh my gosh, this has been such an informative session. My sticky notes are all over the table. I've been writing and writing, and I've learned so much. I hope you guys have also learned. Now we're moving into the panel session where you get to ask your questions, okay? So the chat box has been opened. Drop your questions there and we will take it on a first come, first served basis. And if you also have any question you can target it to any of the speakers, or it can be just a general question, okay? So we have one here from Ahmad. How do you reconcile a situation where the vision of a company does not completely align with the principles of Agile, but the processes within the organization are efficient, and the vision and strategic focus of the entity has a clear buy-in of the employees. So this will be William, or yeah, I think anyone, or Dan, or Joshua. So talking about vision and how to, I guess, align, even though, they might have some processes, but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if the vision and the processes do not align, it's a big problem. We're in chaos. The next thing I'll be putting on my mind is, when was that strategic vision created, and how long has its implementation been taking place? And for most organizations, you could ask yourself, how long does a CEO stay around? Usually 3, 4, 5 years, and a new CEO comes in, and they also change the picture, bring in their new vision, and it takes time to implement such visions. So if it's a new CEO on that journey, it will take time. So we want to give it some time for it to um, be implemented. But if it's taking more than 2, 3 years and there isn't much being done, that's worrying. So there's a vision of being agile, and then it's taking more than 4 years to get there. That's when I'm worried. What can we do differently? Yeah. So if it's a new vision, a new mission, a new set of strategies, then we are taking time to embed it in all the other areas of the business. And after 1 year, 6 months, with the right people recruited, everyone rooting for the change, let's start seeing some changes in 2 years to 2.5 years. But I'm sure most people will say that's too long. The market has changed. COVID has just hit us, and there's so much happening. But the vision is a long-term piece or artifact of the organization. The strategy would have its roadmap. It will have the 1 to 3 months to 1 year. We should see some things being executed, and we should see some highlights and changes across the organization. And then the long-term roadmap is what we should always link to the vision. So it will take time when it's new, and let's go back and look at our short-term roadmap and see what we are achieving. Over to you, Dan, to add.
Yeah, thanks, William. What you're describing, Ahmad, sounds pretty awesome, right? We've got an efficient organization with buy-in on a vision. And so the first thought that comes to my mind is, what's the problem we're trying to solve with Agile? If there's no problem, maybe you don't need Agile, right? I sometimes think people are like, well, everybody's doing Agile, we should do Agile too. But depending on the type of work you're doing, the industry you're in, your organization's vision, if you're not clear on what problem you're trying to solve, it's hard to just grab Agile. So I just wanted to maybe offer that up as a chance to sharpen the opportunity or the problem to solve.
okay, great. Thank you, William, and thank you, Dan. Yes, I think sometimes you need to make sure that you understand what you're trying to solve to see what processes you need to put in place. I think it was either Dan or Joshua that had said in the beginning, you just don't go all over the place and just, picking all that different stuff. And I think there was a quote that stood with me that William has shared. Strategy without process is a little more than a wish list. So, you have to understand your processes and align with your project, with your strategy, and that way pick if you want to do agile or not, and move on from there. Thank you so much. Anyone have any questions? Please feel free to type in the chat box so that our speakers can answer. Joshua, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so initially, when I was going through my presentation, I asked that question at the end there, whether it's a destination or it's a stopover. And I'm interested to see what people's thought based on what they've heard so far is. But I am giving my unsolicited answer to that. personally, I feel definitely it's a stopover because you continuously looking to improve and evolve your organization, continuously looking to decrease the rate at which you roll out software, products, services, how you respond to the market. So another thing to take away is your journey towards agility is going to roll on continuously, and you set a target, you'd achieve that target, you do a check, you'd adjust and set a new target. You cannot have the mentality of I've reached where I need to be agile in your business. It's continuous and it evolves. Yeah. I just wanted to get that out there. Um, that's that's my answer to the question. I don't know if Dan or William have a different view, but that's me.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Oh, I agree that it's a stopover. Sports metaphors or fitness metaphors often come in. If you've got a goal to run a mile, you run the mile, you're like, man, maybe I could go faster. Maybe I could go farther. What would it look like if maybe I could do swimming, biking, and running? Like there's always something more to go beyond. And I think the same thing with agility. It's hard to believe in 2001 was when the Agile Manifesto was created. We're 20 years later. I hope there's something beyond, right, what was written down 20 years ago. I love the values. I love the principles, but 20 white guys in Colorado, I mean, come on, there's 7 billion people in the world. There's probably some other ideas too. So I definitely see it as a stopover.
I also agree. It's definitely a stopover. And that relentless improvement approach would enable any organization going on the journey. I was once asked, when do we become agile? I'm like, really? That's a big question, isn't it? When do we become agile when we start this journey? Is it in 6 months? Is it in 1 year? And I made a few quotes. Look, I know a company that's been on the journey for the last 5 years. They never asked me that question. When do we become agile? Or when do we see agility being embedded? It's relentless improvement. And if you were a sports person, always you would like to improve your skills. And it's quite interesting when you see footballers when they stop playing football or professional football. It's not like they stop. You go and find them around the corner, either playing futsal or coaching or in another area. So it's not a one-time journey. It's a stopover, and there's that continuous relentless improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, and William, to talk about that, and sometimes footballers or professional athletes, they take that same ability to focus and drive and achieve and they apply it somewhere else. Think of horizon 1, 2, and 3. It's not just about getting better at football anymore. It's I could go achieve by focusing in a business setting. I'll go acquire a franchise. I'll go build something from scratch. College athletes sometimes become great car salesmen because they can connect and they can focus and they can execute. And so it's really what's next and how else do I use those skills?
Definitely.
Thank you. I definitely agree. I think people in the comment section agree as well. It's a stopover. We have a question from, I'm not sure if this is a question. Wanda Jenya from Ghana. The organizations are mostly sole proprietorship. Now, when 2 or 3 companies come together to execute a project on large scale, can the Agile framework bring cordiality? Oh, that's a question. Okay. So, to you guys.
I would like to say first is customer collaboration of our contract. Yes, one, agility can enable the 3 organizations, and it starts from leadership. And when we look at contracts negotiation, why do we need contracts? Or why don't we need contracts? I've seen teams say, oh, contracts are bad, contracts are this. We'll start off with creating a contract, and a contract is a fallback. And when we create the contract, we want to build that trust so that as a team, when there's an issue, we can collaborate and solve those. Then now it comes to the work that needs to be delivered. Agile is first about the mindset. Let's have good mindset of delivering value. with transparency, with a good understanding of our principles, the organizational principles. And then we go into the execution phase. When it comes to the execution, yes, I've been told, can a bridge be built with an MVP? And I said, what's your definition of done for an MVP? Ah, it means people can cross the bridge. Is it with rope or with a few things hanging on it? No, we need a bridge in a way that a regulator can sign it off. Okay, if regulators have to sign the MVP, then we need to understand what that MVP is, agree it, let regulators sign it, let it be tested, checked before we give the MVP out to the customer and start building the other pieces. And there's also an analogy I like talking about. What if we were building a plane and we said an MVP is having the skeletal plane in the skies? I'm sure none of us would like to be on the plane. I hand over to Dan.
Yeah, I'll take that plane. Well, and I think what you're describing there, William, is the difference between flying now and flying when the Wright brothers were doing it. They absolutely flew a skeleton of an airplane. They were barely getting it off the ground. It would go afoot. Of course, we wouldn't do that now because we're not in that Horizon 3. We're not inventing something. I hope Boeing and Airbus and everybody else has this figured out by now. And even with all that process, we still see airplanes that unfortunately occasionally crash. But to the point of the, I'm sorry, well, Joshua, I'll hand you 1 second. I apologize. I had a long pause there. Was the contracts hopefully enable the collaboration without some kind of framework for roles, responsibilities, accountability, and a way to inspect that process over time. It can lead to a lack of cordiality. Sorry, Joshua. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you less in terms of how it's supposed to be set up. I've been in situations where, and it's funny, right? We're on Agile. We collaborate with another customer and they're on waterfall. And it's like, oh, how does that work? You both have to be agile. All companies have to be agile. Otherwise, there's no way on earth it can work. Agility can work. But that's where the key comes in, right? So agility does what you mentioned, visualize the work. You visualize these dependencies. You visualize those hard dates. You visualize where we need to join things together. And that's how some of the principles of agility that when you apply in your business, you can get fully agile in the way you deliver some of your services and your products. And your partners could be waterfall, but you have that visibility on both sides of when things need to be delivered by, and you can work together. You don't have to wait for all organizations to go agile before you can collaborate. The key point there is collaboration over the contract, right? We need to have those conversations and then it would set things up in the right way.
You said something and I wanted to hop in there that made me think one of the big opportunities, whether somebody's waterfall or agile or something in between, is how do we accelerate the risk reduction? So one of the problems with waterfall, requirements, design, build, test, right? And that problem happened way at the end. And so if in Agile and with these 3 organizations, if we want to be cordial, you got to bring that risk forward, address the risk, eliminate the risk, hopefully, versus tracking it until the project's done. And it's a big problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you, panelists. So we have a question here. I think this is more of certification. So a lot of people are saying if we're new to Agile, what do we need to do to get on board or to learn more? And David is saying, please, can you advise on what certification type or organization should a newbie in Agile or Scrum go for between CSM, SA, SCM, SAFe, or DA, or PMI? I guess PMI is almost, out extinct. But yeah, so can you advise on what certification? I know a lot of people did that whole PMI. So what do they do now? How do they transition to
Discipline and agile, which is what PMI is doing now. Discipline and agile. So there's so many versions of certification out there, even within each of these frameworks or methodologies. They have different sets of training for Scrum Masters, for product owners, product managers, architects, DevOps, leaders, etc. So the first point would be, I would say, find what position are you in now? What's your starting point? Are you a developer within a team? Are you a Scrum Master? Are you a leader of a business? And then if you're going safe, which is I'm also biased towards safe. When William knows that I'm very biased towards safe, but fortunately I've done a bit of Kanban and Scrum as well, and XP on the side. I would say if you're a leader in the business, pick leading safe. It gives you a nice overview, a nice holistic view of what agility is, what principles you need to focus on, and it gives you a nice flavor of some of the ceremonies that teams need to go through to actually achieve agility. It's a nice starting point. If you're a Scrum Master, I would say you can start with Scrum Alliance and their Scrum Master course, and then you can build on top of that with some of the advanced Scrum Masters from Skilled Agile or any of the other providers. Yeah, but that's basically my advice. Really, is find your position where you are, and then use a surgical approach. Find that training that meets you at a leader level, at a team level, or any other level you're at. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. We have Jean-Paul Paho, right? Or Pano? Paho, okay. Asking if the recordings will be available. Yes, it will be available, and we'll share that with all participants, okay? I have a question, and this is from me to the panelists. So I noticed, William really loves SAFe, but how can a small and medium or startup business use the SAFe framework? Or is that, should they focus on that? Or, I know Williams is like, yes, go for it. But, every other person has to say, oh, William, what will, a small and medium size or startup?
I think
let's have Dan go for it. Let's have Dan go for the question.
All right, just before Dan comes in, right? So I think, William, you had an excellent slide when you showed the big picture, right? There were some buttons in that big picture which talked about essential safe and full safe and enterprise level safe. And you remember when I was speaking and Dan mentioned several times is you need to know where you are. What's your starting point? If you're a small, you need to probably start from your essential level. And Dan also mentioned if you're not looking to go enterprise too big, you can start with the basic Scrum and Kanban and start there and then begin to grow out. So the framework allows for huge conglomerates, big companies like Boeing and Bosch and etc. But it also allows for the small startups in the corner in the business. I use some of those principles at home personally with the basic principles of Scrum and Kanban. With my kids, for instance, we have our Scrum and Kanban board that we use to practice, their chores and rewards and all that kind of stuff. So that's my take on that. Dan, I don't know if you have a
well, I don't know if it's deeper. I was actually probably less deep. I was trying to think of a metaphor for safe without, not being offensive. I think of it like a big box retailer where, oh, I want groceries. They have them. I would like to buy a pair of pants. They have them. Like Safe looked at all the stuff going on there. Like, okay, yep, Scrum is in here. XP is in here. Yep, lean portfolio management. Yep, we'll get us some lean startup. Like, they grabbed all the stuff and they put it in a giant store where you can come say, you know what, I want a candy bar. And it's in there too.
Yeah.
So certainly could do that. Sometimes I think the startups by nature are already agile, don't have the silos. They haven't overly formalized and become fragile. And so the lean startup principles apply there. And yeah, you could. Certainly there's essential safe. They took the big picture and one of the iterations went, okay, we need a smaller picture. So they made a smaller picture and a medium picture and a big picture. Anyway.
Yeah.
So,
but the principle,
William? Oh, yeah.
The guiding principle always needs to be start small and scale out, right? So
for sure.
Starting small is with the the fundamental, the basics of team level agility, and then as you grow up, you begin to get more and more the progressive nature of it, right? William.
Yep. The big store analogy makes me worry whether safe is safe.
I think that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Yeah. And just like Joshua and Dan said, look, when you come into that big shop, as a small company, there are frameworks, practices that you can use to help you on the journey. And the beauty of it is you can always look up and say, we've got our strategy to be a big company there. So there's a framework that can give us that guiding light, the North Star on the journey. So safe in its way tells you, look, being small is not, there's nothing wrong with it. Having the roadmap to be big, I've got tools, I've got, let's say if you go back to the shop, I've got Lucozade, I've got water, I've got everything to help you on that journey to become a big company. And at any point in time, you could always look back at that and have something to support you. So that big store keeps you safe, and it enables you to have the right tools when you need them, or the right food when you need them. So you could always use the safe methodology.
Thank you. How do we track agility progress? So is it using KPIs, or are there different, sets of metrics for Agile framework? And this is to all three of our amazing panelists.
Yeah, I'll say what you don't measure, you can't improve. So in agility, there's a lot of tools out there to enable us measure our team, measure our organization, measure the various teams involved with the work we do. Team agility has become popular, and when you look at most frameworks, you could always find, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet with a few questions to answer to help you measure, is it the pulse of the team at that particular point in time? And there are other frameworks as well that will help you measure the pulse of the entire organization. Bringing it back to team level, during the team's week, we need to measure how the team is performing. So when you go to say an agile team, you hear bend up, bend down, charts, and there are various other tools like defects chart, various things to measure from the team level. And when you look up at the leadership level as well, there are tools that will help you measure organizational agility. So there's a plethora of Excel spreadsheets out there that will help you.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things which I'm very big on being able to measure and see what's happening. Hence my statement on baselining, and then beginning to see the needle move. But I'm also conscious of the fact that a lot of the times when we commence our journey towards agility, we want to measure everything. I want to be able to see I want to know the velocity, the defect rate. I want to know how long the stories spend there. I want to know how many stories they're delivering, how much value, how the team. But sometimes you measure too many things, you lose focus on what's the important stuff. So most of these frameworks will give you, or these methodologies will give you a standard set of metrics to work with. The good practice metrics, you want to look at metrics that will guide you towards your outcomes. I don't want to specifically call out a few, but some of the really nice ones I like are like lead time, cycle time. I like those ones because it gives you an end-to-end view of how the teams are doing. So I would say be surgical with what you want to measure in the beginning. Pick 2, 3, 4 metrics you want to measure. And as your teams grow and evolve, my personal, as they go through the Shuhari phase, when they begin to master the skills and techniques, then you can begin to expand your metrics, what you're measuring. Because if you go too big, too early, you're going to kill the teams. You're going to kill your transformation, your program, your portfolio level with too many metrics. Yeah, we all love our dashboards. We all love the metrics because it makes us look I'm busy. I'm doing so many things. But sometimes less is better. Yeah.
Yeah, less.
Yeah. The phrase that came to mind also, and I don't know who came up with the quote, but when the measure becomes the goal, it stops being useful. And an example of that, there was a manager at a place, the burn down had to be on that line, or he got angry, to be quite honest. And so the team started putting the burn down on that line, but they just made up the data so the chart looked pretty. And I've seen that happen in a lot of cases. So you have to be careful with how the metrics are used, using them for curiosity. Oh, what's that telling us about the system versus going, you're a bad team, your burn down's not on the line. And so just being really careful when you start measuring and rewarding behavior based on measures. That's when it gets very tricky.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think someone had asked for resources or checklists or cookbook to check agile progress, but Dan has shared something. So check it out.
Yeah.
That's a personal favorite of mine as well.
Do you like comparative agility?
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah. I use it a lot because fortunately comparative agility gives you so many, it's not framework specific, but have framework specific metrics. So within comparative agility, you have the safe group of metrics and stuff you should be measuring, and it gives you some Scrum stuff and some Kanban stuff. It gives you a different flavor, and it's easy to administer because it's all digital, right? The digital natives, we love that. So it's easy to administer, and it's not sitting down in front of someone with a checklist and filling it out. It's wonderful. I really love it.
What I like about it is you have the chance to say, I'm a financial services company. How does my agility stack up against other financial services industries? Because if you're trying to compare your financial services agility to Uber, well, good luck. You know, that's not even an apples to apples comparison. Uzo.
Okay, great. So questions are coming in. What's the biggest challenge you faced leading an agile transformation journey, and how did you overcome it? So I think we'd like to hear from each of the six. Dan, Jasper, and William.
I'll go first because it's at the top of my mind, right? The first thing is, this can't apply to us. We can't do this. You know, our case is special. We're a special organization. You don't understand us. We're different, right? And in my view, yes, organizations are different, but the principles remain the same.
Right.
And once you go through those principles, and it's the challenge has been opening the eyes and the mindsets of people to realizing, and especially on the leadership side, to realize that, yeah, we're special, but these principles do apply to us. Yes, we're different from other organizations, but if we apply the guidance, we can get to the destination or the stopover, as we said earlier, right? So that's my biggest challenge is breaking that boundary of I'm different and I'm special, and letting us know that, yeah, you're different and special, but the core things remain the same. Yeah, that's top of my head. Probably if you woke me up in the middle of the night, that's what I would say. Yeah, that's a big challenge for me.
Thank you, Josh. Dan?
For me, I kind of think back to not really appreciating how long change takes. You know, even if you're getting a Scrum team to be a really effective Scrum team, it takes a while. So then you multiply that by thousands of people in big enterprises, and you've got people and systems and in all this stuff that's set up over years and years and years to behave a very specific way. And now somebody's maybe coming in from the outside because they got a new CEO who's like, we're going to do the safe thing. That's a lot. William, your visual there were like 10 certifications listed before you get to the point where you're doing a big room planning event. That change is hard. And I think that the difficulty and the time needed and the money needed and just the effort to change, I think, is really underappreciated.
Yeah.
Off to William.
For me, has been the questions asked by the team. We think we are agile, but our leaders are not.
Right.
And where I've been in organizations where it started off as Scrum, yes, that challenge was there. I didn't say the leaders didn't know what to do or what to say or how to be, agile. It's like doing agile and being agile, or talking, oh, we need to be agile. And Dan and I were saying this earlier, that during the pandemic in the UK, you could hear the Prime Minister, we need to be agile, nimble to help deal with COVID. And I'm like, so using the word does not mean you're doing it or being agile. So where that question has been asked, and fast forward being in safe environments, I've always told people, look, I could bring out a video, a picture of where our leaders have started the journey. And it's not you who is starting it. It started off with leadership. They've bought in and they've asked the question, is it going to be a 2-day or 3-day training? How do I move my diaries around to get into all this to learn? And when leaders have learned that, we've seen that big change. And then we communicate that back to the teams to tell them, look, you're not on this journey alone. Our leadership have gone through it. At Philips, I saw the same. At Fujitsu, I saw the same. With a lot of consultancies, I've seen the leaders, partners, directors going on the safe course and say, I just really want to get my head around this, even though my calendar is booked. If that continues, then I'm sure that most organizations having the leadership buying, teams seeing what the leaders are doing, leaders being good example, it will help in the long term. So for me, is it a challenge or a question? It's both. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are some industries exempt from being agile? I know y'all had touched up on it, earlier, but can we just, reiterate, and especially for those coming in late? Are some industries exempt from being agile?
I don't think any industry is exempted. From my experience, I was teaching the financial ombudsman and in Canary Wharf in the UK, and it wasn't teams in the ombudsman, it was the top 15 in the organization, the very top execs. I've done some work with Boeing, and it wasn't, I don't say the middle management, it was the big top shots. Done some work with a lot of banks, and the name just goes on. And it's from the top execs to the teams and down. I don't think industries are exempted. Even football clubs are not exempted. I was watching football and I saw Oracle. We support, I'm not going to mention the team because I'm sure someone will be saying, William, that's your team. We support the club on its digital journey. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So it's
for Joshua.
It's an interesting question, right? Because I do a lot of mining for information from time to time, and I found it quite interesting that the FA, the English FA, have embraced agility. So they were looking for some agile. They were going around some agile transformations. So that was interesting. Then I looked over at your side, Dan. The administrator of the SATs. They've gone through an agile transformation in the way they create, set, and administer the questions. And I'm like, oh, that's education, sport. All right, so this thing really does, because I initially started from the position where I used to work heavily on infrastructure. I used to work heavily in data center, building, and I thought, you know what, we can't be agile in that delivery. It just doesn't work for us, But my stance has changed. Even in big hardware data center build kind of projects, you can be agile. So my point of view is really agility can affect everyone, everywhere, varied levels.
It's an interesting question. And as I think about it, a couple examples that came, I just had a new driveway put in. And so that maybe has me was thinking, if halfway through the concrete pour, I went out there and went, wait, no, I want the driveway over there. That would have been a very expensive iteration. And so when I think of things that are expensive to iterate on, building a skyscraper, putting in a new interstate, the cost to iterate is ridiculously high. And so when the cost to iterate is very, very high, you can't do some of the things we would typically think of as agile. And so that's maybe where I would start to explore how much planning, how much rigor do we need. Now, the good news is we've been building roads since before the Romans. I hope we have it down to a little bit of a science now. And that's not the case with some of the new technology solutions that are trying to get brought to market. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So as we wrap up, I'm just going to ask this final question. So what's your advice to CEOs on adopting agile transformation? Advice to CEOs.
I'll say, personally, get on it now or get on it later. And when you get on the journey, take time to understand what it is you're going through. And results don't come tomorrow, they take time to come on. And sometimes patience is a great key. Train your people, get them to understand the journey, and you see some benefits.
Awesome.
That's for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll go next and then you go last, yeah?
No pressure. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah, so that's like, we shifting it up a little bit. Yeah, when in one of my slides, on the recap slide, for forming agile teams, there was one point I'd like to call out, which is it's an odyssey. Your transformation is an odyssey. This is not a mini series that has one episode and it's done. It's an odyssey. You're going to have multiple iterations, multiple journeys as you go along until you get to that end point. So from a leadership, from a CEO perspective, know it's an odyssey. And the second point is you need to, at a point, give the teams, the leaders, autonomy to actually get things done. And I saw an interesting, I love Comic Agile and I read them a lot. There was an interesting one on working from home yesterday where the leader stood in front of the business and said, we're trying this working from home stuff. So we hope you take it up and you enjoy it. The team came back, so how can we just choose and work from home? And then the leader said, yeah, you can work from home except on days that you have sprint planning, retrospectives, reviews, demos, or days that are not prime numbers, that don't start with a prime, prime dates and stuff like that. But no, at a point in time, as a leader, you need to give the teams autonomy to get things done. Without that autonomy and without knowing it's an odyssey, you probably will end up somewhere you weren't expecting to end up. That's.
Yeah, tough question. So first of all, I would be excited if a CEO was asking how to get started, because a lot of times agility starts somewhere in the messy middle and it hits that C-suite level and gets stuck. So to William's point, some of the things in SAFe, trying to get the communication and getting the C-suite, if you're C-suite, you're asking them to go to SAFe training and they're like, well, I'll give you 30 minutes to tell me about Agile. It's going to be tough. I think for me, a C-suite, getting started, being clear on what the outcome is, and really being willing to hear about the problems that, quite honestly, you might be putting in the way of the organization of being agile. How is HR set up? How are we structured? All those barriers. Scrum, what's the phrase? Scrum won't fix your problems, but it'll make them really obvious. Same thing with, SAFe and Kanban and those other things. You're going to see problems, and just be curious about those and knock them down one at a time.
Okay. One more question. I know I said we're wrapping up, but can you describe the role of initiatives without the necessary infrastructure and accuracy in data or processes? There's often the need to devise homegrown solutions that are location specific.
We missed the question a bit.
Okay. Oh, my internet. Okay, I'll go from the top. The role of initiative and discretion in organizational processes. For instance, in Africa and some other parts of the world, without the necessary infrastructure and accuracy in data or processes, there's often need to devise homegrown solutions that are location specific. William,
Yeah.
you got it? Okay.
So I'll say context is very important. I've been to different companies, and like Joshua would say, we are all not the same. So when you get into a particular business, you need to spend time understanding the teams, the structure, and I wouldn't say go around saying, "Oh, this is not agile," or "This is not what agile says." And I would say I'm not an agile extremist. I'm true to the word agile. So I look at practical agile, and sometimes when the teams have gotten to a point where I think they should be allowed to bring out flow and creativity in the way they work, definitely I allow them. So first I'll look at context, and on that journey, I'll build the capabilities of the team, understand their context, share that message with them, connect it with a suitable framework, safe, and then build capability on and on and on. So yes, we are all not the same. Uh, if you're a coach going into an organization, think about the culture, the context, and the teams involved. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
Culture,
I know.
teams involved.
I think Joshua and I were both nodding very vigorously as William was talking. And the context matters. And that's one of the places I see scaling go wrong is when they say, we're scaled, all the teams have to do the same thing. And that's not what SAFE advocates for. But I feel like it's really easy to say everybody has to do it the same. And that would not be a particularly agile way to approach agility. So anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. And I'll go back to my metaphor is that as a coach going into an organization, we all need to go through those 4 stages of team, forming, norming, storming, and performing. And the moment you go in, you change one variable in the organization, it resets you back to the beginning. And you might go through it faster, but you need to go through those forming and norming phases, right? And that's where being a coach, as a teacher, you go into an organization. What do teachers do when they're in class? They listen a lot. They listen to the students, but they impart knowledge as well, and they have that patience. It's really important to understand the context of the place you're going to consult with or work with, but then you're listening so that you know how you can impart your knowledge, the principles and the guiding points. You're not listening and then you just do what you wanted to do already, but you listen so that you can adapt your principles to meet them at their point of need. Because if you don't do that, there's friction, and then eventually your transformation will fail.
That hit. As someone saying, we should do this more often. Everyone has had an amazing session. So final words from our panelists.
I've had fun. That's my final words. I've had loads of fun. I mean, I've learned some. As much as it's me trying to share some of my knowledge, I've really enjoyed the questions that's come through, and as well listening to William and Dan as well has also nourished me. And there's a metaphor. There's a thing of. Who the barber cuts your hair, but who cuts the barber's hair? And this is a situation where I love to continuously learn and evolve. And this is a great opportunity where that's happened. And as you go along with your journey towards agility and you become that barber, don't forget that you need to visit somebody else to also get your hair cut. Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
for me, the haircut analogy didn't really land. But as Joshua, as you were talking, I too got a lot of value out of this. And what I thought about was the question where somebody was asking, which certification should I start with? And I might encourage that person and other people just to start with engaging in the Agile community. Yeah, a class is valuable. Certifications absolutely look great on a resume. But if you're just curious about Agile and trying to grow, get engaged with the community, do the events, join in, and it's a continuous journey. And take the certification when it makes sense.
Listen to your podcast. Listen to podcasts.
Listen to podcasts for sure. There's a lot of good ones out there. But thank you for that.
Link on the chat for your podcast if they would like to join.
Yeah, I'll put the name in there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Also, for me, I've been nourished, and I just enjoyed the movies when Joshua started. He took me to the movies, and everything about the presentation just kept me glued. And for Daniel's stuff, I'm like, I've got notes all over, and I'm like, definitely, I'm looking there, I'm typing off. It's just been a learning environment where I think I've gained so much. I've learned from my colleagues, and the questions have been those that have got me thinking. And it's like I walk out of here thinking, and it makes me more seek to learn from other events. I don't only come to these events as well or talk at these events. I go to listen to other people. So it should be that continuous learning mindset. And do feel free to send your questions. If it's to Joshua or Dan, we'll send them off, and the conversation should continue. And I hope that in the future we would see you again attending and helping on the learning journey. For me, it's been so nourishing, and I'm excited for the rest of the week. I wouldn't say I can't wait for the weekend to begin. I've loved today, and it's been wonderful. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Oyem. I think maybe we can drop the LITC LinkedIn page so we can follow, and that discussion can continue there. So oh my gosh, I've learned so much, such an informative session, and it was very, very interactive. I enjoyed it. I had fun. And I've learned so much. And I'm still glad that the recordings will be shared so everyone can go back and, take note, pause, go back, pause, fast forward, and just, download that whole insight. And I think we don't have any more questions, and that'll be it. But I didn't get any response. Someone said, can we have this open?
I would say
They want another session. Maybe not,
one last word. The company that I'm currently consulting for Leshego is recruiting. And if you've got the skill set, the mindset, do get in touch or do have a look at their website. They're looking for people with an agile mindset and people who help them on the journey. So definitely have a look at Leshego's website.
Leshego. Okay, please can you drop it in the comment
I'll
section?
definitely drop it. Yeah.
And, so thanks to all our participants. Thank you so much. And I'm super glad that you joined the session, and I hope it's been quite informative and, you've had so much fun. It wasn't boring, you took in as much information as you could, and also, see how you can apply it in your journey. Or if you haven't started one yet, see how you can start the agility movement. So don't forget to join the groups, check out the company that's hiring, and also Dan's podcast. I'll be seeing you guys there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. And if no one has anything else to say, I think we're done.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
can't hear your video. Okay, go ahead.